much to go over this episode. I'm so excited to talk to you about it. All right, so where I want to start this episode 2 breakdown is a roll call, right? Let's highlight the important characters and locations that are being featured on this show from the Stephen King mythology. So we'll have a running tab. We've got Dick Hallorann from The Shining and Mike Hanlon's family, among a couple other things introduced last episode. Those are the big ones. Oh, yes, and also, a lot of you had a theory that Teddy was related to Stanley. And in fact, it was proven this episode when the principal confirms that his last name was Uris. So I guess his brother, his surviving brother, is Stanley Uris's grandfather, because Leroy Hanlon is Mike Hanlon's grandfather. All right, so this episode, as I said, even more to go over. So curfew's back on. Wouldn't be Derry without a curfew for the kiddies. And lots of missing posters. That Derry PD, I don't know how they sleep at night. Maybe they don't. But Chief Clint Bowers, he's trying to be a good guy and failing. But yeah, his family, that's not going to get much better for them, because later on, it's another Bowers, I guess police business stays in the family, whose son Henry is not only the town bully, but is used as a weapon by Pennywise. And the butcher's name, did you catch that? I mean, Stanley Cleaver makes an impression, but the more important thing is Stan Kersh. Mrs. Kersh, of course, is later on a disguise that Pennywise takes on to terrorize an adult Beverly. Can't be a coincidence. There are no coincidences in a show like this. Juniper Hill is the mental institution in the Stephen King universe, and it's highlighted also in the opening credits. I did a whole second video to go over those opening credits specifically. Oh, there's just so much there. So be sure to check that out as well, linked down below. And then there's the secondhand rose shop, which is where Leroy Hanlon buys his son that telescope, but it was also in It Chapter 2, where Bill finds his old bike, Silver. More important in the book than in the movies, but still. And of course, that's where Stephen King had his hilarious cameo. I loved that cameo. And then there's the Bradley gang's car. Oh, let's talk about the last 20 minutes of this episode where the story really starts to cook. Yes, I'm having such a good time going over this show with you. So if you haven't already, I hope you'll subscribe so we can keep this party going. Well, this was a Friday episode, but for the most part, every Sunday night. Again, I have that other episode up breaking down the opening credit scene. So all you have to do is hit that subscribe button and maybe the bell as well, so you'll get notifications. And that way you'll know as soon as my videos go up. All right, so I was thrilled to see a strong, well, mostly, some people were trying to hate on this show. I'm like, as you know, my fear, watch out, Pennywise. My fear is that this will be another Alien Earth, a show which critics loved and some of us loved, but yet people really took that show down. And I see a little bit of that again percolating, but for the most part, I think people appreciated the first episode. But that's because it was big on shock and awe, the opening and the ending. As I told you, it's knocking thoughts. But with that in mind, I was like, and this is an episode dropping on Halloween. Happy Halloween, by the way. But I was like, oh, not as much shock and awe in this episode. I mean, it has its moments for sure, but it's very slow, at least for the first, I'd say 2/3 of the episode. Well, slower, right? It's a different vibe. So thank goodness that the last 20 minutes really start to, it's not like episode 1, but they really, it's very rich, not only in terms of story, but mythology. And it features one of my favorite sequences in the first 5 episodes of the show. Now, I've only seen 5 episodes. They've held back the final 3. Some of you are insisting there's 9 episodes of Welcome to Derry. I've seen a couple of people saying that. I don't know where that came from. I got an email from HBO themselves saying it was 8. So we'll see. Maybe there's a secret episode. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But HBO told me 8. Anyway, We're only in episode 2, and I think it's pretty encouraging that we already know we get an idea, we find out what the military, we don't know how things are going to go down, but we know what the military is trying to do. It's not Project Arrowhead, it's Operation Precept. And I looked up the meaning of Precept, didn't really seem to be anything. It should have been Project Arrowhead, much less cool. But the mission is very interesting because these mofos think they can use Pennywise as a weapon? What? The hubris of the U.S. military. All right, so it turns out that they're not exactly sure what they're looking for, but they just know there's something in Derry that generates such debilitating fear, it can kill a man. And that's why Leroy Hanlon was transferred to this base. Because it turns out, in his previous time with the military as a pilot and a prisoner of war, he suffered a brain injury, which means he now has no fear. Daredevil's like, I want my trademark back. And General Shaw feels that Hanlon might be the only man who can approach this weapon successfully. The Pennywise will have no effect on him. The attack in episode 1, that was actually a test to see if Leroy Hanlon truly was a man without fear. And it turns out he passed. And, as the Cold War ramps up, 1962, by the way, the year of this show, was the same year as the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is mentioned here, which was percolating at the time. This is the summer of 1962. I think it wasn't until October that the Cuban Missile Crisis came to a head. But the military feels that this weapon just might be the only thing that can help the United States beat the Russians. And if you know your military history in real life, you'll know they were trying all kinds of crazy stuff during the Cold War. Well, all the time, but it got nuts. It got knucking foots during the Cold War. They were experimenting with LSD, right? And the CIA was putting supposed psychics into sensory deprivation tanks like 11 over in Stranger Things. That's inspired by that stuff that the CIA was doing. So this totally tracks. Excellent stuff. And sure enough, Operation Precept has recruited its very own psychic, Mr. Dick Hallorann from The Shining. By the way, the black soldiers trying to find a place to hang out after work is definitely planting the seeds for the opening of the Black Spot. That is, again, as we've discussed, a key and tragic nightclub for black military members stationed at Derry, and, not only a key part of Derry history, but Dick Hallorann's history as well. So again, I don't want to give it away if you don't know what's going to happen to the Black Spot, but keep an eye on this side story. So yes, Dick Hallorann is very important to Operation Precept because they're asking him to locate objects with Pennywise's psychic energy so they can triangulate Pennywise's position. I'm just saying a bunch of kids found him no problem in the 80s. All right. So anyway, and sure, they should be drafting kids into this operation. But yes, sure enough, after months of digging, these adults, although they are being watched mysteriously by a group of Native American teenage boys from the woods. But yes, these adults, with Hallorann's help, find the Bradley gang, their car and their bodies. So back in 1935, which was the previous Pennywise feeding cycle, Pennywise, as the legend goes, got the townsfolk of Derry to murder this gang, to gun them down. And many of the townsfolk remembered or recalled seeing a clown in the firing squad with them. And that's depicted, by the way, in the opening credits. Be sure to check out that video. An obvious homage, by the way, to what happened to Bonnie and Clyde, right? Gunned down by police in 1934. Interestingly, they were actually homegrown heroes to the general public at the time because of people were so upset about the inequity. Bonnie and Clyde had a real kind of Robin Hood kind of feel to them. The Muschettis have said they would like to do additional seasons of this show going back in time to each of Pennywise's feedings. And the next one, if they did a season 2, would be 1935. So maybe we get to see the Bradley gang, come into play, terrorize Derry, and then get massacred. All right, but what's happening in 1962? Let's talk about that supermarket sequence. So what did you think of this sequence? As a former film student, I love it because you could do it basically for a student film. And that just goes to show that you don't always need fancy bells and whistles and a big budget to be effective. It's so inspiring in its elegance and simplicity. Like the use of practical effects here for the most part is fantastic. I love it. I hope I get these in advance, but I hope they kind of show a behind the scenes of you can kind of guess a little bit how it was done, which is part of the fun, but I'd love to see how they did this with the practical effects. So Lily, who everyone is already suspicious of because of her time at Juniper Hill, goes supermarket shopping for her mother. So there's this crazy lady who we see at first, but it's the guy following her a couple of times in the aisles, dipping in and out. There's one moment where he's like right behind her that I absolutely loved. It's a little like the Smile movies too. But again, it's just a creepy dude smiling, and it's just so incredibly effective. And Pennywise, who's controlling this whole hallucination, the Muschettis have addressed that. These are very advanced hallucinations that are done in public spaces. So, there's been some question as to what does everybody else see? I think, in a supermarket, people aren't too much paying attention to Lily until she breaks the pickle jar. It just ends up just being one. But still, some people I've seen are frustrated they haven't actually seen the clown yet. But you are seeing Pennywise because he's in control of all these hallucinations. And so I don't know. Some people don't seem to be making that connection, but it's working for me. All right. So yes, he slowly cranks up the tension. I adored I didn't even catch it till the second time I watched the scene. The aisles earlier on sliding in silently behind her as she goes through the store. That's just so effective. And again, just put them on some wheels and slide them in. It's great, but the timing is excellent. Until the loudspeaker finally asks Lily Bainbridge, have you lost your marbles? Well, there's new ones on sale. I loved it. Then we see Maddie, Susie, Phil, and Teddy on cereal boxes, but not just any cereal boxes, Pennywise's cornflakes. Don't eat those. And it doesn't take long for Lily to find herself surrounded, trapped by pickle jars, like the ones in her locker in the last episode. But here, these have the bits and pieces of her dad, right? And Pennywise makes her dad a total perv, like Beverly's dad. Maybe Beverly's dad was okay. Maybe it was Pennywise back then too. But yes, all the jars break. I wonder how they did that. I wonder how they, because that without hurting the actress. But that was amazing. And so all of his body parts come together for Daddy to reassemble himself to try and get a kiss for Daddy with tongue. Whew! Thankfully, Lily snaps out of it. But bad news is her actions get her sent back to Juniper Hill. Really? It was just, I think her mom doesn't want to deal with her. But it's just one, it was just like she didn't pull like a Jack Nicholson in The Shining where she just went over and got the whole shelf on the floor. It was one pickle jar. That supermarket guy's a narc. Keep it to yourself, buddy. This kid's going through stuff. But yeah, she ended up back at Juniper Hill, even after she threw Ronnie's dad under the bus in an effort to stay out of there. So yeah, let's talk about the parallels in this episode. There are some really meaningful thematic parallels in this episode, but first let's talk about the gruesome one, and it's Lily versus Ronnie for a lot of this episode, and they're the two that have the Pennywise visions, right? Lily at the supermarket, but earlier, Ronnie in her bedroom for another freaky birth sequence. What is it with this show and birth sequences? But this time it's Ronnie herself being born. Whew! Pennywise taps into what it seems to be Ronnie's fear and guilt of, it seems she killed her mother in childbirth. And then to layer on the guilt, that she clearly feels guilty about letting the kids into the theater because otherwise maybe she and her father certainly wouldn't have been involved if she hadn't done that. And then also now she's going to be responsible for her dad getting killed if he's framed for these kids' murder. So this sequence I thought was incredibly well done and very inventive. This one required a lot of VFX, but I really thought it was well thought out. I think some of my favorite aspects were the bed frame slowly turning into Ronnie's mother, the top of the frame being her arms. That was amazing. There is practical stuff layered in here as well. It's very, very cool the way they're doing the VFX here. And the actress playing Ronnie's mom does a fantastic job, particularly with the emotional levels in the sequence. One moment screaming, and then the next coldly matter of fact, which I thought was very effective. The umbilical cord was a nasty, brilliant touch, tethering Ronnie to this monster, pulling her in and forcing Ronnie to have to chew her way free. Ew! But Ronnie's a fighter. She did what had to be done. And did you see in the stomach as she was being pulled towards it, not only Pennywise's telltale teeth, but his glowing eyes as well. Whew. Also, by the way, speaking of gruesome, in the opening, when they tease you for just a moment to say maybe it was all just a dream, we get a gruesome new point of view of the kills from the end of episode 1. That angle of Teddy splattering up against the projectionist booth, that was particularly inspired and, horrible. Oh, it was very well done. All right, now let's talk about those more meaningful thematic parallels. So, as you might have noticed, this episode has 2 people framed for crimes they didn't commit, and 2, maybe 2.5 interrogations. So the powers that be in Derry want this Capitol Theater murder solved. They want people to feel it's done, it's over. People don't have to worry about it anymore. And, to give the parents closure. But, really, it's like the mayor in Jaws. They just want to move on. So they put pressure on another police chief, Chief Bowers, to pin it on Ronnie's poor dad, Hank, who does not have an airtight alibi. It turns out he was home asleep with only his mother to vouch for him. And of course she's going to say he was home. What's worse, Bowers tells Lily that if she can't help him identify a suspect, well, then maybe the only witness is really the only suspect, meaning maybe she killed those kids. And they should send her back to Juniper Hill just to be safe and check her out. So Lily folds. She says he tricked her, but when he rephrased the question of saying, can you be sure Hank wasn't there? I mean, come on. She chose herself over Ronnie's dad, and karma, she still got sent back to Juniper Hill anyway. Then there's Masters, the racist grunt in the military who takes the fall for the attack on Leroy Hanlon. Sure, there were 3 guys, and they only seem to have 1, but they feel this case is also closed. But Leroy Hanlon, he's not so sure, because he's not just a pilot, but the kind of guy who asks questions. And in stories like this, you not only move the plot along, but sometimes you can get yourself in trouble. But here, he knows that Masters couldn't work an old obscure Russian gun like the one used in the attack, so he tricks Masters into proving that it wasn't him who did that. So then Hanlon confronts General Shaw and he says, I'm going to keep asking questions to your superiors. And so that's when Shaw is like, well, let me tell you why you're really here and about Operation Precept. Now, there's also a very clear distinction that's being set up between Ronnie's family and Will's family. So yes, Derry seems to be largely segregated, as we see from Main Street and also the neighborhood that the Hanlons move into. By the way, Leroy Hanlon is listening to Sam Cooke, and that is a very powerful choice, not only because he was an iconic music star at that time, but, and I urge you to look into this because it's truly a horrible story, but he was murdered in 1964 in a very bizarre and racist situation. It's a horrible story. So there is a very clear contrast between Will and Ronnie's families, right? Ronnie's lives on the outskirts of Derry, begrudgingly accepting the way things are. In fact, that's why her grandmother wants her to go back to school instead of being homeschooled. So not only she can eventually get out of Derry with an education, but, the grandmother feels that Ronnie just is being not as careful as she should be because her father's sheltered her from, again, the way things are. But then there's the Hanlons, a middle-class family moving into the heart of Derry this episode, who challenge the way things are. Charlotte in particular. She seems to have been an activist back in their last home, Shreveport. Her actions, they say, even getting a brick thrown through their window. But while she's expecting a racist reaction when she goes shopping in town, everyone's very nice to her. Because yes, there is an undercurrent of evil when she sees a boy attacked by a gang of other boys his own age, and nobody does anything to help. And when she tries to step in, they look at her like she's crazy. Charlotte is also clearly under a lot of stress because of the secrecy of her husband's job. She just feels very left out and adrift. As many housewives, by the way, did at that time, because society and their own families were just, not giving them a life. So that's very interesting. And Leroy is having trouble connecting to their son. Luckily, his wife is helping him out a little bit. But his son is more into science than sports. Will's interest in science, by the way, and a telescope ties in perfectly to the fact that Pennywise and that turtle Maturin are from space. But while young Will might not be into sports, he has a different type of game. Yes, as he sat in detention with Ronnie and he reeked of that stink bomb, he said, the stink bomb is made of the same components as the clouds around planets. So in fact, he's really sitting there covered in stardust. Ooh, no wonder Ronnie starts to look at him a little differently. And Will, by the way, is not the only boy in Derry with a crush. Well, also, Maddie had a crush on Lily, and that did not go well. Although Ben had a crush on Beverly, and that ended up going great. So you never know. Take your shot, guys. So yes, we also meet Rich this episode, who has a crush on Marge. Ha, even Marge can't believe it when she's walking with the patty cakes down the hallway and Rich is smiling at her when she's standing right next to Patty. That was a great sequence. I thought all of the actors there, all these child actors, did a fabulous job. From that awkward, blissful smile on Rich's face to Marge's reaction to that girl in the back giving Rich the finger. That was great. And then also, I love the use of patty cake. The patty cakes play patty cake to raise the tension in the cafeteria as Ronnie and Lily, a couple of tables over, argue about helping out Ronnie's dad. Although I don't know why Ronnie felt that Lily saying it was a monster who did it would solve anything. But at least, Lily would have done what was right. But yeah, so that was interesting. But also there's tension within the patty. Marge really wants to be popular. Lily doesn't care. She's like, people are dying. I don't care. But Marge, it turns out, is a bit of a cut-up. A little bit of a comedic angle to her, and she's stealing the spotlight from Patty a little bit. So Patty's kind of upset about that. I really like the actress who plays Marge as well. That's a difficult role to pull off, and she does a nice job. And so that's episode 2 of Welcome to Derry. While the episode doesn't have the same shock and awe as episode 1, does every episode need to be like that? I think it's still good. What did you think of it? I think the richness of the story pulls you in, right? I wish they'd spread it out a little bit more. I feel, there's the Ronnie Nightmare sequence, which is really good, but I feel the episode doesn't really kick into high gear until, again, the last 20 minutes, and I get concerned. But I hope everybody still really likes it. I hope that's enough for everyone. Also, what do you think of the new Losers Club members, Will and Rich? And did you like the supermarket sequence as much as I did? All right, so again, be sure to check out my separate video about the opening credits sequence. Share your thoughts down below, subscribe, and of course, as always, you can check out even more videos right now.